Okay, welcome to our last session on anatomy and physiology for the Chapter 9 nervous system. So we are going to get right on into the last section, which is on the brain. So it will be a little bit lengthy, but I will get through it as quickly as I can. So let's move right on with the brain. Lots of videos that you can watch on the brain, of course. So we are ready for note number 41. The brain is composed of about 100 billion neurons, which communicate with one another and with neurons and other parts of the nervous system. The brain also includes neuroglia. We've already talked about what neuroglia are, which actually outnumber the neurons. Number 42, the brain is divided into four major portions: the cerebrum, the diencephalon, the brainstem, and the cerebellum. Of course, in this one brief lesson on the brain, there's no way that we will cover literally every single thing that you would need to know. Let's say if you took A&P in college, but it'll get you on the right track. So there's a picture that divides it up and shows you the four main parts, and then it also, you can see, divides the brainstem into parts. So we're going to start with the cerebrum. Now, number 43, the cerebrum is the largest part of the brain. It includes centers associated with sensory and motor functions and provides higher mental functions, including memory and reasoning, language and speech, voluntary body movements, and sensory perception. Number 44, the cerebrum consists of two large masses called the left and the right cerebral hemispheres. You've probably heard of your hemispheres before, which are mirror images of each other. The hemispheres are connected by the corpus callosum, which is a bundle of axons. The hemispheres are separated by a layer of dura mater, which is tough connective tissue that surrounds the brain. Number 45, the surface of the cerebrum is not smooth. You've seen enough pictures of the brain to know that. It contains folds and grooves on the surface, which increase the surface area and allow more complicated thought processes. It has ridges called gyri, shallow grooves called sulcus, deeper grooves called fissures that divide the cerebrum into lobes. So you can see how the gyri are more just like smaller ridges, and the sulcus are like much deeper grooves. Number 46, the lobes of the cerebrum are named after the skull bones they underlie, so that makes them easier to remember. They include the frontal lobe, formed by the anterior part of each cerebral hemisphere. So I did do a video on each of these lobes. The parietal lobe, remember the bones of your skull that we've already studied. This is posterior to the frontal lobe. The temporal lobe lies below the frontal and parietal lobes. And the occipital lobe, which forms the posterior part of each cerebral hemisphere. And there's a picture of all the lobes at once you can look at and study. Number 47, the lobes of the cerebrum have a thin layer of gray matter called the cerebral cortex. It is the outermost part of the cerebrum. It contains nearly 75% of all of the neuron cell bodies in the nervous system. Just beneath the cerebral cortex is a mass of white matter that makes up the bulk of the cerebrum. It contains bundles of myelinated, we already studied that, axons that connect neuron cell bodies of the cortex with other parts of the nervous system. Some of these fibers pass from one hemisphere to the other by way of the corpus callosum, which is a bridge between the right and the left hemispheres. Number 49, specific regions of the cerebral cortex perform specific functions. So these are some things that happen. So you have sensory areas. These interpret impulses that arrive from sensory receptors, producing feelings or sensations. Association areas analyze and interpret sensory experiences and oversee memory, reasoning, verbalizing, judgment, and emotion. It includes concentrating, planning, complex problem solving, and judging the possible consequences. Then you have motor areas. Remember, when you see that motor, it usually has something to do with muscles, so this controls skeletal muscles. Note number 50. Both cerebral hemispheres participate in basic functions such as receiving and analyzing sensory impulses, controlling skeletal muscles, and storing memory. In most individuals, one side of the cerebrum is the dominant hemisphere, controlling the ability to use and understand language. Number 51, in most people, the left hemisphere is dominant for the language-related activities of speech, writing, and reading, and for complex intellectual functions requiring verbal, analytical, and computational skills. So make sure you pause right now and study this. It's going to show you some right brain functions and some left brain functions. Number 52, Broca's area or Broca's area is in the dominant hemisphere, controls the muscles that function in speaking. The non-dominant hemisphere specializes in non-verbal functions, such as motor tasks that require orientation of the body, understanding and interpreting musical patterns, and non-verbal visual experiences. It also controls emotional and intuitive thinking. Number 54, the corpus callosum, which once again connects the hemispheres, allow the dominant hemisphere to control the non-dominant hemisphere. Deep within each cerebral hemisphere is a region called basal nuclei, which produce the neurotransmitter dopamine. The neurons of the basal nuclei interact with other brain areas and facilitate voluntary movement. Two disorders related to the basal nuclei region are Parkinson's disease and Huntington's disease. So you've probably heard of both of these diseases. I know you studied Huntington's in biology. That was one of the only dominant diseases that we studied then. And you have probably seen movies or different things with someone who had Parkinson's disease. In both diseases, the person is unable to control their muscles, resulting in spastic, jerky motions. Michael J. Fox, I believe, is a celebrity who has Parkinson's disease. Yep, there it is. So I would definitely, even if you're not watching any of the videos, I would Google that. It's very interesting to read about his story. Number 56, interconnected cavities called ventricles lie within the cerebral hemispheres and brainstem. These spaces are continuous with the central canal. It means they just kind of flow into it of the spinal cord and contain cerebrospinal fluid. All right, so we are going to look at a part called the diencephalon. It is located between the cerebral hemispheres and is above the midbrain. It surrounds the third ventricle and is composed largely of gray matter. Within the diencephalon are dense masses called the thalamus and hypothalamus. You've probably heard of those. The thalamus is the relay station for sensory impulses. It receives sensory impulses and transfers them to the appropriate regions of the cortex for interpretation. The thalamus produces a general awareness of certain sensations such as pain, touch, and temperature. The hypothalamus is located under the thalamus. It helps maintain homeostasis by regulating certain activities. You know, homeostasis is my favorite thing. So things like heart rate and blood pressure, body temperature, water balance. It controls hunger and body weight. I'm hungry right now. Sleep and wakefulness, movements of stomach and intestines. So super important. And we have our brainstem. So number 59, the brainstem is a bundle of nervous tissue that connects the cerebrum, the diencephalon, and the cerebellum to the spinal cord. The parts of the brainstem include the midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. Note number 60, midbrain contains bundles of myelinated axons that join lower parts of the brainstem and spinal cord with the higher parts of the brain. Contains reflex centers for vision and hearing. Note number 61, pons occupies the full thickness of the brainstem. It is most visible anteriorly as a rounded bulge where it separates the midbrain from the medulla oblongata. It helps control breathing. Number 62, the medulla oblongata is the lowest part of the brainstem that merges into the spinal cord. It is important for a lot of things: heart rate control, blood pressure regulation, breathing, reflexes such as coughing, sneezing, swallowing, and vomiting. So take a few minutes and pause and study the parts of the brain stem. And some great videos once again to go along with this. All right, next we're going to move to the cerebellum. Note number 63. The cerebellum is a large cauliflower-like part of the brain that coordinates muscle activity. The cerebellum has an outer cortex made up of gray matter and an inner region of white matter. If you have forgotten the difference between gray and white, you might want to go back and find that in your notes or the videos. The cerebellum provides the precise timing for skeletal muscle activity and controls our balance and equilibrium. Because of its activity, body movements are smooth and coordinated. The cerebellum can be compared to an autopilot. It compares the brain's intentions with actual body performance by monitoring body position and amount of tension in various body parts. When needed, it sends messages to initiate the appropriate corrective measures. All right, now let's take a look at how we can protect our central nervous system. Note number 64, nervous tissue is soft and delicate, and the irreplaceable neurons are injured by even the slightest pressure. And remember, they don't divide by mitosis, as we already talked about, so once they're gone, they're gone. Nature has tried to protect the brain and spinal cord by enclosing them within bone. So we've got our skull and we've got our vertebral column that we already studied in our skeletal system chapter. Membranes, these are called the meninges, and a watery cushion, the cerebrospinal fluid. So these are all things that are helping protect all of this. Protection from harmful substances in the blood is provided by the blood-brain barrier. Number 65, the meninges. This is connective tissue membranes covering and protecting the brain. There are three main types of meninges membranes. So first of all, we have the dura mater or dura mater. It's a double-layered membrane that surrounds the brain. One of its layers is attached to the inner surface of the skull, forming what's called the periosteum. The other layer, called the meningeal layer, forms the outermost covering of the brain and continues as the dura mater of the spinal cord. Then we have the arachnoid mater. It's a middle web-like layer, and you can probably figure out why it's called that. Think of arachnid spiders that make webs. And then we have the pia mater. This is an internal layer that clings to the surface of the brain and spinal cord following every fold. So you can see all these different parts, so take a little bit of time to study this picture. Number 66, the cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF, is a watery broth type fluid, similar in its makeup to blood plasma, and that's from which it forms. The CSF in and around the brain and spinal cord form a watery cushion that protects the fragile nervous tissue from blows and other trauma. The CSF, cerebrospinal fluid, circulates between the hemispheres and ventricles and down into the central canal of the spinal cord. Number 67, the blood-brain barrier. The brain is absolutely dependent on a constant internal environment. It cannot withstand even small fluctuations in the concentration of hormones, ions, and nutrients that continually occur in the body. If the brain were exposed to such chemical changes, uncontrolled neural activity might result. Therefore, neurons are kept separated from blood-borne substances by the blood-brain barrier. Number 68. The blood-brain barrier is composed of the least permeable capillaries in the whole body. In other words, it's hard to get stuff through there. Of water-soluble substances, only water, glucose, and essential amino acids pass easily through the walls of these capillaries. Metabolic waste, such as urea, toxins, proteins, and most drugs, are prevented from entering the brain tissue. Some substances, however, can pass the blood-brain barrier. The blood-brain barrier is virtually useless against fats, respiratory gases, alcohol, nicotine, and anesthesia. These substances can affect the brain. All right, next we're going to look at traumatic brain injuries. A few anyway. Note number 70, head injuries are a leading cause of accidental death in the United States, and the most common types of brain injuries include a concussion. You watch almost any show on TV and you might see somebody getting a concussion. So this is a slight or mild brain injury. The victim may be dizzy, see stars, or lose consciousness briefly, but no permanent brain damage occurs. A contusion is the result of tissue destruction. The individual may remain conscious, but severe brainstem contusions always result in a coma lasting from hours to a lifetime. Nervous tissue does not regenerate. Then we have cerebral edema. This is when death may result due to swelling of the brain due to inflammatory response to injury. That's what edema means, is swelling. Individuals who are initially alert following head trauma and then begin to deteriorate neurologically later are most likely hemorrhaging or suffering the consequences of edema, which is swelling caused by trapped excess fluid, both of which compress vital brain tissue. Note number 71, cerebrovascular accident. These are commonly what we call strokes, are the third leading cause of death in the United States. CVAs occur when blood circulation to a brain area is blocked and is a blood clot or a ruptured blood vessel, and vital brain tissue dies. Some body functions may be lost or death may occur. Fewer than a third of those surviving a CVA are alive 3 years later. Some patients recover at least part of their lost faculties because undamaged neurons spread into areas where the neurons have died and take over some lost functions. Most of the recovery seen after brain injury is due to this phenomenon. Number 72, we've all heard of Alzheimer's disease. It's a progressive degenerative brain disease that ultimately results in dementia, mental deterioration. Alzheimer's patients represent nearly half of all people in nursing homes. Between 5 and 15% of people over 65 develop this condition, and up to half of those over 85 die from it. Structural changes in the brain include abnormal protein deposits and twisted fibers within neurons. Victims experience memory loss, irritability, confusion, and ultimately hallucinations and death. So almost everyone knows somebody who suffers with this, maybe a family member, it may be someone in your church or just a neighbor that does suffer with Alzheimer's. There are lots of videos on Alzheimer's that might be interesting to you. This last video was one that I wanted to show you that doesn't have anything to do with Alzheimer's, but it does have to do with OCD. So you might want to look up Howie Mandel and his problem that he's had with OCD. So I believe that is it. You are saying yay. Let's go back to the right spot. Okay, so I hope this has helped you if you've gone through and watched the videos and followed along with the notes. That takes care of chapter, excuse me, chapter 9, the nervous system. I'm not sure if we'll be doing any more chapters or not, but I can put more things on your Google Classroom if you would like. So you can just let me know. And once again, if you have any questions about any of the topics, first go through and reread and restudy and rewatch. Pick you out some videos because videos help a lot. Videos help me a lot. And then if you still have any questions, just feel free to send me an email on school email, and I will do my best to try to help you. So I hope you have a great summer. Use your packet along with this. Connect the two together so that you can get the most out of the nervous system chapter.